On the Wado Radio Show.
Yeah, man, it's DJ Wado. It's the Wado Radio Show. It's more than music. It's ministry. And, man, let me tell you something. I've introduced a lot of people as vets, but I think most of those vets pale in comparison to what this man that we have on the line with us has contributed to our scene, both as a record label exec, record label owner. He also is celebrating 20 years of one of the most consistent websites for covering Christian rap, spherehiphop.com. He also runs a great PR firm for artists in terms of helping them spread their message and getting their message out to the masses, man. He's just an all-around great guy, and I'm happy to have him on the line. Josh Niemyjski is on the line with us from the cold state of Minnesota. What's up, my brother?
Not much. Thanks for having me. It's actually 62 degrees right now.
What?
But, yeah. But here's the rub. We're going to get a blizzard on Friday.
Okay. I'm getting ready to say, bro, 62 in February is crazy, bro.
Yeah, it's out of the ordinary. We'll take 30.
Man, that is insane, bro. Well, listen, man, I want to say this publicly, bro. Congratulations on 20 years of Fear of Hip Hop, because you guys, I mean, look, you know, I've been in this thing 10 years and I've seen a lot of people come and go. I can't imagine how many people you've seen come and go, other sites, artists, all of that. And you guys have stood the test of time, man.
Yeah, thankfully. I mean, it hasn't been easy. And there's, I mean, probably once a month I think to myself, what am I doing? But it's about staying true to the calling, and I really wrestled with the whole calling part of it for a good 2 or 3 years when I first started.
Yeah.
Talked to pastors and other leaders, and was just like, am I crazy for thinking this is what I'm supposed to be doing? And yeah. I guess being able to fall back on that and know that this is where I'm supposed to be makes those difficult times a lot easier.
Sure. So before we even get into how you started the site, I was telling you this before. I've never even heard your story about how you got into Christian rap, because as I mentioned in the intro, you've worn a lot of, and currently wear even a lot of different hats over the years in terms of contributing to the progression of this genre. I would even make the case, man, like a lot of the big movements that we've seen over the last 20 years, Josh has had a hand in helping to promote them in some way. You know, whether you're talking cross movement or, you know, some of the other old school Christian rappers. A lot of the music that I get on this show, Josh sends to me. And if you hear instrumentals and acapellas, it probably came from an artist that Josh is promoting. But in all seriousness, man, how did you get into this music, man? Who were some of the first people that you heard, and then what made you, want to start contributing to it?
Man, I mean, I had always kind of grew up in church. I always been into hip hop since about the second grade. So I was like, I don't know, 7, 8 years old. Remember staying in from recess, hearing the new LL Cool J 12-inch, stuff like that.
Yeah.
I was never really exposed to Christian music at all until about, it would have been 89. Our youth group had gone to a Christian music festival, and all I really knew was stuff like Newsboys and DC Talk and
wow.
The CCM kind of rock stuff, and
yeah.
I never really felt like that music was it for me, but I messed with it just because I needed something more positive in my life, and a little bit more encouraging that made my walk easier to kind of live out. But then we were I heard some beats off in the distance at this music festival, and I was like, what is this? So me and a couple of my friends from youth group, we ran over there, and it was SFC.
Wow.
And
at a festival?
Yep, at Sunshine Music Festival
Wow.
in Wilmer, Minnesota. This is 1989 or 1990. I'm not
That's crazy.
for sure. Yeah, I even still have a signed photo with Soup and QP. I think was there, and then DJ Dove.
All right, you giving Sketch a run for his money already with the Christian rap paraphernalia here.
Yeah, we're kind of dorks like that. We've got we've got a lot of gear, but so yeah, that was kind of my first exposure to it, and then I really started researching, trying to find more of it. So I was really into SFC and Freedom of Soul,
yep.
Dynamic Twins a little bit, Idle King a little bit, and there were some others, and I would actually write letters to people. You'd read the liner notes in these tapes, and it'd be like, for more information on so-and-so, right here. So I was writing letters
Hilarious.
to these artists trying to find more, and then you'd read through the track listing, and you'd be like, oh, there's so-and-so guests, so like, how do I find out more about them? And just talking to the music people at Christian bookstores and trying to find more. And then when you'd go to an event and there'd be that one person, which would be like Sketch, and you'd link up and be like, oh, you listen to Christian rap too? So you're sharing notes with each other, trying to find out like what you're into and, what they know and stuff like that. So that's kind of how I got into it.
So what made you want to start contributing, bro? Because, you just as a fan, you're digging the music, you're going to these Christian bookstores. I mean, did you try to rap at some point?
Yeah, I did once.
When you had that pause, I knew what that meant, bro.
Yeah, it was terrible. So like, I'm up on stage, I'm holding the mic, I'm like 18 years old, and I just froze. Like,
oh man,
it was horrific. But then it was cool. I had my friend there, and he kind of encouraged me, and I got through my 16, and everybody kind of gave the courtesy clap, and sure. I was like, yep, that was terrible. Never doing that again. So, as far as like contributing, it's funny when I look back now, I can see where God was putting in all of these benchmarks in my life, sure. and how it was leading up to where it was, but I never connected the dots until I was in college. So I was about 19. Yeah, I was 19 years old, and I had a class project, and we had to make a website. And I was like, what am I into? And this is fall of '96, spring '97. What do I do? Well, it's like, I love Christian hip hop, and it's like that story I just told about how you find out, writing letters, and maybe I could put all of that on the internet.
Wow.
So it kind of was an outgrowth of that. Maybe I could make it a little easier for other people like me. So maybe there was 20 of us back then. Man. Maybe it would be easier, and we could post news about new releases, or how do you get the new Sev Static tape, or the new Lab Click tape, or LPG or Freedom of Soul, or whoever, KJ52 back then.
He's still going.
I mean, it was, yeah, it's funny too, because I keep saying tape, and it was like, that's what it was. It was tapes. The only Christian hip hop vinyl I had up to that point was PID, Here We Are.
Okay.
And that's a really tough to find record. I've only ever had two, ever, but. So it was just tapes, and then CDs made it a little bit easier, and then it obviously progressed into what we have now.
Wow. So that website was Fear Hip Hop?
Yes, yes. I originally had this GeoCities page that I've been kind of tinkering with. I looked it up a couple years ago, and I don't think it's archived anywhere, but I'd been really into grits, so I was kind of learning HTML,
Yeah.
just posting some Grits pictures and, little comments about, what I thought of each song on their album and stuff like that. But so yeah, it was the class project ended up being Sphere of Hip Hop. I think the Web Archive website has photos of all of the first versions and stuff like that. Was mad ugly, but it is what it is, and here we are today.
Man, that's crazy, bro. How many? One of the things that I actually dig about your site is it seems like you're always redoing it and upgrading it, and you know what I mean. Just kind of like, bro, how many times have you redone that site? Seriously, you probably can't even count.
Like, man, probably like major overhauls. I would say like 10.
Right.
Just because, like, a couple times, like, software crashed and, like, the database became corrupted or, something like that necessitated some sort of movement. But I try to refresh it every 2 years or so, just because I think the technology improves and just making sure it's easier. We're, like, right now there's this thing called Google AMP, and just making sure the code is up to speed to where, if someone's looking at it on their phone on a 3G connection, like, how is it going to render? And, basically taking as many hurdles and boundaries out of the equation so it's easy for people to kind of, mess with it and enjoy the content.
No, that's good, bro. That's good, man. So, 20 years ago, man, who were some of the first artists that you were putting up? You said Sev Static. I'm thinking SFC still, Freedom of Soul still. Who else were you putting up on the site, man?
Oh man, so Grits, because they were actually really approachable and really cool.
Yep.
With answering emails and things like that. So I've known Tehran and Stacy for a long time. Tehran actually just moved to Minnesota too, which is
wow,
which kind of blew my mind. So we're trying to connect soon. But like the Deep Space 5 guys, so early, this would be like Lab Click. These guys used to collaborate. Listener and Illtrip used to collaborate through the mail, and they had never met each other for like 10 years.
Now that's crazy.
So
they would then.
Yeah, so they would one person would do the beat, record their verse, and mail the tape to the other person, and then they would record their verse and finish the song and mail it back, and then they'd put these tapes out. So
you're not even saying email; you're actually saying like through the mail. Yeah,
so they were doing that stuff in the mid 90s, and they put out about 12 albums that way, and they actually never met in person until I'm trying not to butcher this, but I think until the second Deep Space 5 album. So we put out the one on Uprock in 2001, but then there was another one a couple years later. Like, Illtrip actually got in a car accident. He wasn't injured or anything on the way to the airport to record for the one we did with Uprock. So they had never met face to face, even though they had done like 12 records together. So the Pride, which was Manchild, who ended up being the front man for Mars Ill, and then Syntax the Terrific, who's done a bunch of solo stuff. Just Me, I ran into him somehow. He founded Scribbling Idiots, all the Tunnel Rats guys. So I got to know, Rafi, who's now Shane's Worthy, Zane, Journey, all of those guys. There was lots of stuff. Peace 586, obviously from Freedom of Soul, and then he had a couple solo things. The guys in Future Shock were very super cool. Like, I went out to California and stayed with them for a week, and they kind of showed me around and introduced me to people. Sojourn, Ajax, and Redbones were Future Shock. DJ Trey Kell was another guy. Man, lots of people. John Rubin. I'm trying to
Columbus,
kind of
Ohio's
pull from.
finest, right there.
Yep, DJ Madge. Even he had the Sabbatical Transit mixtapes. DJ Form. A lot of. So there's probably, I don't know, 3 or 4 dozen people we were really in close contact with early on that kind of fed us information, and it was a really cool time.
Were these, like, how did you select who you put on the site? Were these just like the people you had heard of, or these were the people that got back to you, or like how were you even selecting it back then? Because obviously, you know, there weren't like these central hubs like how we have now. Like we got the Sphere Hip Hop, we got the Rapzilla, we got the Wade On Radio, we got the Jam the Hype. You know, we got these places where it's a little easier. You guys were just in the formation of that, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was a combination of the two. It was, you know, sometimes we just didn't know. Like we didn't always know who was doing stuff, so you just kind of tracked down leads, and you were dependent on people answering emails, or if you've got a phone number, answering their phone, you know, and not acting like you were totally crazy. Most guys were really cool about it because I think they were flattered that somebody actually cared. So I think it was as fun for a lot of the artists as maybe it was for me.
Wow.
As well. But as far as like how we curated content, and I mean, we posted pretty much everything. I mean, there was some stuff that I was like not really into, but we knew that there was no other way people were going to find out. So we would post stuff that was maybe outside of the scope of what we would normally share, maybe like today, because it was more about serving this community of people and just getting the information out, and less about like trying to fill some sort of arbitrary niche within the scene, which is kind of where we've shifted now, where it's like we know where we belong and we know what our audience wants, and we stick to that. We're not trying to do what any of the other outlets do, or you know, that's not us, that's them.
Yeah, and I mean, I feel like when I first got into Christian rap, you guys as form, like there was basically 3 message boards that I would go to. Actually 4. Cross Movement, Reaches when it was open, but then the main 2 that I would spend the most of my time in was Sphere Hip Hop and Holy Culture. You know what I mean? And you could even see, I mean, this is 10 years ago, but you could even see it was just like the people that went to Sphere Hip Hop, they had a whole different view of the music, of Christian rap, of the culture, of all of that than the people that was on Holy Culture, and obviously way different than the Cross Movement form and the Reach form. You know what I mean? And that's one of the things that I've always appreciated about you, is because I feel like, you know, doing what you're doing in terms of the artists and the types of music and all of that you promote, I feel like for a lot of guys, even today, you give a lot of people a voice that, man, honestly, bro, like there may not be a lot of opportunities for some of these guys, you know, to get exposure and to be heard. And you know, I've really appreciate that about you, bro, because you stick to your guns with that.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been hard because, you know, it obviously affects the, you know, the business and aspect of it, which is, you know, an unfortunate reality of what we all have to deal with. But you know, it's been cool, like, because we're able to sort of stand in the gap for some guys that are like, they're believers, but they don't necessarily belong or feel welcomed or necessarily even identify with the whole of Christian hip hop, but they know that there are people out there that get what they're trying to do, and you know, kind of like they have a home there and they're welcome there, and it's been cool. Like, it's been a lot of personal opportunities that have gone beyond just posting their music or, tweeting something or whatever, but just being able to encourage them that, like, hey, you're not alone. Like, be encouraged that, you're out doing shows at bars and that it isn't a waste of time.
Yeah.
There are people that need that, and that maybe you're not doing, what's on top 40 radio, stylistically with your music, but what you're doing matters. And, that's probably one of the most fun and encouraging parts of doing all of this for me, is hearing, like, who grew up listening to the music, and how they came into contact with it. So, and it's more verification that what we've done and what's kind of happened over the span of these 20 years, that it's actually mattered, and that there's a greater purpose, and God has a bigger plan, and we're just a piece of that.
Man.
And
absolutely. When let me ask you this. I have my thoughts, but I wasn't around when this happened, and I think okay. Before I go there, when and why did you start Up Rock Records? Let me ask you that, because we got to talk about that, because I feel like that's a very important piece of history that a lot of people may not be aware of.
Sure. So I actually did not start Up Rock, but I was kind of the one. I was kind of the one that grew it into what it needed to become.
Sure.
So Tooth and Nail Records, BEC, out in Seattle, Washington.
Yep.
This is 2000. They wanted to do, kind of dive into that space, because there were a few labels that were doing Rescue Records, Syntax Records, Goatee, obviously.
Yep.
And then there were a few other, outlets that were doing well, and it was kind of on the rise, and it was starting to spike, and you were seeing more artists kind of bubble up from the surface. So there was a local artist.
This is, for people's perspective, this is around the time that a lot of people were getting record deals.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yep.
Didn't Cross Movement get their deal around then? Obviously, KJ, Grits,
mm-hmm.
some of those groups.
Yep. So 2000, MG the Visionary was a local artist, and I think that's what made that all kind of jump off. Like, he actually came up with the idea and the concept for the logo. And then Soup the Chemist, and then Illharmonics. And Illharmonics had a cool little run. They were on an MTV show called The Cut.
Okay.
And basically it was you performed a song, and then the judges voted on whether you moved on to the next round.
Wow.
So they actually made it into the final 10 people. And so that created a lot of buzz for them. So the first 3 artists on Up Rock were Soup the Chemist, MG the Visionary, and then Illharmonics. And then there was a 4th project that came out before I started, which was called Sinner's Prayer, and that was a hip-hop praise and worship album, which is really cool. It had people from all over kind of the scene that were involved in it. And it's kind of a cool note in the history of the genre, and kind of a forerunner of a lot of the, it's cool seeing, like, Crossover Church and,
yep.
Some of the other hip-hop based churches now that are actually doing that. And it's not just a novelty where, we were like, well, I hope people like this. So the fall of that year, yep. So the fall of that year, they had been kind of looking for someone to be their general manager and kind of run everything, somebody that knew what was going on. And I'd been friends with MG, and he called me up and he was like, hey, do you want a job? So I was like, well, I'm graduating in May of 2001. Yep, and I'm getting married too. So anyway, I sent my resume over. They flew me out to Seattle, had the interview, nailed it. Started January 1st, 2001.
Wow.
and then it was all, it was all history from there. So we signed, Mars Ill,
Yep.
Tunnel Rats, KJ52, all the subgroups within Tunnel Rats. So you had like New Breed and LPG and Sev Static, Rafi. There's a couple others too.
Piece 586 too, right?
Yep, Piece 586. And then Deep Space 5. We did a few other really cool things. We actually did. I think
So
it was
basically, you just
first.
signed everybody you was promoting on Spirit Hip Hop.
Well, probably that. I'm sure that's the way it looks like from the outside. But I mean, I think it was only natural because I knew these people.
Yep.
And I was most comfortable
Yep.
with them, and that goes a long way, because I think the idea of just kind of well, I think your music's dope, let's do a record deal together.
Sure.
It has to be a little deeper than that. But yeah, we did some really neat stuff. One of the coolest things, and I know you'll appreciate this, but we did a couple mixtapes that actually were, mixed with
Real
a
mixtapes.
DJ. Yes. So we had this idea where we wanted to. A big thing back then was samplers.
Yep.
What could you do to put a $2.99 or $4.99 CD in stores and get people familiar with your music? And what we did is DJ All-Star, a longtime friend of mine, we had him do 2 volumes, and we did them for $4.99. Pulled songs off of all of our records. He mixed them together, really, really cool presentation. And then we were very strategic about it. There was this thing you could do with coupons with your distributor. So we put booklets of coupons in each of these samplers.
Wow.
Where you could get $4 off every one of our records. So you could go out and buy the new Tunnel Rat album and get $4 off. And you'd be like, oh, who's New Breed? Well, I got a $4 off coupon. Let's pick that up. And it was amazing, because I think each of those haven't looked in probably 3 or 4 years, but the last time I looked, they had sound scanned almost 80,000 copies.
Wow.
Each. And because of those coupons, I mean, it was driving people to all these other artists, and it kind of had done this thing where we could put out an album, and we knew we were going to do a certain threshold of sales because we had such a good, devoted core audience of fans where, anything we put out, we knew people were going to check it out because it was an uprock release.
Yep. Man, that's great, bro. Y'all had that core fan base popping early.
Yeah, it was it was nice, because now I'm learning that that's not easy.
No, it's not. But I mean, you see, I mean, I'm even just hearing you talk about it. It was like, if it feels like, I mean, you said this earlier. The Lord strategically was putting you in certain positions, causing you to form certain relationships, and if you hadn't had that experience doing Sphere Hip Hop even before this opportunity presents itself, you probably couldn't. You probably wouldn't be able to do it, man.
Mm-hmm. No, that's spot on.
So I guess I gotta ask you this though, bro. Like, why did it end? Like, why didn't it keep going?
Well, probably the easiest way to explain it is that when I started out, it was we had modest budgets because sales history. There was no sales history. It's like we knew what a Grits record would sell. We knew what a John Rubin album would sell. We knew what a DJ Madge album would sell.
Yeah.
But we weren't goatee, and we weren't kind of attached in Nashville. We were kind of the black sheep, so to speak, of the industry.
Especially being in Seattle.
Yeah. So we were sort of disconnected, and that was an advantage and a disadvantage in some ways. So it was, a lot of things that we wanted to accomplish, we maybe had to work twice as hard to achieve, just because we didn't, like our owner wasn't Toby Mac, so it's not like he could be like, hey, which is super cool. He's an amazing guy. Really respect him.
Yep.
He's always been super gracious with me. Super cool. So I was kind of faced with in those sort of pressures, and then also internal pressures where we were the low guy on the totem pole. So you had Tooth and Nail Records, which was, your rock bands, kind of a little bit of punk, a little bit of kind of hardcore stuff. Then you had BEC, which is more the CCM leaning stuff. So like your Jeremy Camps, maybe a band like Cutlass.
Sure.
And then you had Solid State, which was all the really hardcore stuff, really heavy, metal and things like that. And then you had Uprock, which was like, nobody in the office, like really nobody in the office was ahead like me. So it was different, like trying to kind of communicate like what's going on and what we need to do. And, and so I had to basically take what they did in how they promoted a rock album and adapt it without knowing what I was doing.
Wow.
And adapt it in a way that would work for people like you and I that are into this music.
Yep.
So budgetarily, it was like, here's $1, make 10. And then I was like, okay, got it. Let's do it. And then a year later, it's like, here's $0.25, make 20. Okay, got it. Then towards the end, it was like, here's $0.05, make 100.
Wow.
And it just got to be, it got to be so stressful. I mean, I was working 80 hours a week. And I think just because of when it was, like, none of us really knew kind of what we know now.
Sure.
And it was more difficult to communicate with artists and kind of manage expectations, and have that kind of artist label synergy where it's not like always so confrontational and like my artist doesn't get me and they're trying to mess me over. And so it was just really stressful towards the end. And my boss Brandon was like, we need to sign more pop hip hop artists. And I'm like, that's cool. Number one, I don't like that stuff, but I'm willing to do it if we can find someone that fits that's going to be good. That's not going to be, because we had a few creative missteps where he had signed Ray Buchanan, the football player.
Wow.
And it's funny that you don't know about it. So go figure. So, and I told him flat out, like, I heard the record and I was like, this is a mess. Like, I can't in good conscience, like, get the Uprock audience to buy into this with a straight face. So it was crazy because I told him, I was like, we're not putting this on Uprock. Like, you can fire me, do whatever, but you could put it on BEC. Like, I don't want anything to do with this. So it's crazy because they had spent almost $100,000 in marketing for that album. The mayor of Atlanta declared his release day like Ray Buchanan Day.
Wow. I'm looking on his wiki page right now, and his wiki page is real short. But post NFL career, musical career, Buchanan made a rap music album in 2002, and that's all it says.
Yeah, and did all these crazy things, and I mean the release party was at the ESPN.
Wow.
I forget what it was called, the ESPN kind of bar in Atlanta.
Wow.
And all this great stuff, and it's like, so we spent $100,000 marketing this, and the formula back then is you wanted to spend no more than $1.50 per album sale to, like, convert that marketing into a sale.
Yep.
So it's like $100 grand. It's like, okay, we want to spend, we want to sell 60, 70,000 units, and then that'll help recover all the marketing and recording and budget costs and stuff like that. So we're great. So it comes out, and it sells 230 copies the first week.
Oh, my God.
And I'm just like, I'm like, bro, I told you. I told you so.
Man.
Like, and yeah, so that complicated things, because unfortunately that was out of my hands and I didn't have any say in that. So that was kind of projected back onto what we were doing. So there were only so many KJ52s, you know, there was one.
Yep.
So it's not like there was, 25, take your pick, and then that Ray Buchanan situation, and then a few other things where maybe our artists were a little bit more difficult to work with. And, it kind of culminated into like a huge kind of burnout for me where I was like, I can't do this anymore. So we had a couple meetings and just decided that my last day was, I think it was in October of 2003. And then I just kind of did freelance work after that. So they put out a few albums after I left that were already finished that I'd kind of put together. But that was kind of the demise there. I helped negotiate the contractual release of most of the roster because I knew that they weren't going to want, there was nobody running it. So I knew it was going to be a frustrating situation for everybody. So
now KJ stayed with them for a while though, right?
Yeah, no, it was a really good situation for him because he was able to kind of float above those things. He's always had really good management, and he toured more than anybody I know, and I think that's the secret to his success. Right there, he's just in front of more people. So it really worked super well for him because I think we had it set up right from the beginning for him to kind of excel, where it's just like you could almost copy and paste that template and pivot, in meaningful ways going forward, and it worked out really well for him.
Wow. So when you left and you started doing freelance, I know one of the groups that you did a lot of work with was Cross Movement, particularly on that Holy Culture album, and that, I guess, will be a couple years after that. But who else were some of the folks that you were working with around that time?
Oh, man. So, so I did, actually, the Holy Culture one, that's the one with the 4 pictures on the front, right?
Yep.
The four guys. That was actually on BEC. So it was actually while I was still at Uprock. So I did most of the marketing and kind of direction for that, and that was really cool to kind of do that because it was a little bit of a different record and a little bit of a different audience. So it kind of stretched me to find some new ideas and stuff like that. But after that, the freelance stuff. So I did. Oh boy! So it was the Cross Movement album with the blue cover. What was that one called? God, I'm forgetting. So I did that. Was it? Oh man, I'm totally forgetting. Flame's first album, the Truth album.
You had with the blue cover. That's what you had. You had House of Representatives is with all of them. Like,
yep. So
like kind of dressed up. Then you had Human Emergency where they were like doctors.
There was that. No. Okay. So
but that was kind of blue because they had the blue doctor gowns on.
Mm-hmm.
Higher definition?
No, it was. Yes, Higher Definition.
Higher
that's
definition,
what it was.
Yeah.
And then Flame's debut, and then the Truth album with the white cover. Let's see, we had a
you had
Fanatic.
Moment of Truth, and you had the Faith. The Faith had the white cover.
Yep.
The Faith.
And then was it True Life had one, Fanatic, the Gift Wrap Project.
You worked all those. Wow.
Yep. And then, about then, I did a little bit of stuff for Grits. and goatee.
I still feel like that
most,
gift wrap album is, I mean, bro, like that's such a great Christmas record. Like I wish more people did Christmas music, man.
Yeah, it's funny too because with my PR work, I every September, October, I'm like, you got to do a Christmas song. You got to do a Christmas song, and I tell guys all the time, I'm like, if it's dope, they're gonna play it for 20 years.
Yep.
And you don't no other type of music you could do is going to get that strong of a burn for that concentrated amount of time. And all I do is I just send everybody a link every year. It's like, here's a whole batch of Christmas songs. Like, here you go. And some of these guys, like on the royalty end, are making more money off of their Christmas joints than they are on their regular records because of all the radio play. And I think it's changed, obviously, but the Christian radio format is generally not as receptive to urban music. But for whatever reason, they'll play a Christmas song that's a full on hip hop joint. So that was a really good project, and I know that still gets tons of plays. I see it pop up all over, and that's like 12 years old, 11 years old.
I think it's older than that, bro.
It was 2005, I think.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I guess that would put it at 12 years old. But yeah.
Yeah, so
that one in the Illect album, man. Those are like the and we'll talk about Illect in a minute, but yeah, man.
Sure.
Like, that's just a little side note.
Yeah, no, it was a good time. So yeah, around then I was doing all the cross movement record stuff. Beat Mart, I did a lot of their early projects. The best of the submissions, Bobby Bishop, Jafia, Rob Hodge, all of those dudes. And then there was some indie stuff, but it was
SOHH. You did SOHH's album too?
Yes.
Wow, man.
Yep. Yeah, that one still pops up all the time. Like I saw something on YouTube and they were playing one of his instrumentals. I'm like, how in the world did you find number one this song that's like 10 years old? Number two, how did you get the instrumental? Because I didn't send them to hardly because it wasn't even really that much of a thing back then.
I got them.
Yeah. So
I have them. That's crazy.
So it's funny to see where that stuff keeps popping up.
Yeah, that's real crazy, bro. Golly, man. Man, I didn't know you worked with all those people then. I'm like kind of mind blown about that. Like I knew the cross movement thing. I didn't know. I mean, bro, it's like, did you have your hand in Grape Tree a little bit too?
No, actually. Well, not directly with Grape Tree.
Okay.
But I did a minor amount of work for a few artists that were on with them at the very tail end.
Sure. That's you know what, man? That seems like I want your opinion about this. Like obviously more of the cross movement type artists is what really got me into Christian rap. Like when I was hearing Lecrae, R. Swift, they were kind of lamp mode. But it seems like even back then, like you definitely had like these fractions. Because it was like if you talk to people that lived in the South, all they talk about is Grape Tree.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like I never heard of Grape Tree until like I guess it was about over for them. You know what I mean? And then it was like you talk to people up here, it's all cross movement. You talk to people on the West Coast, tunnel rats. People that kind of live in the Midwest, I guess it was a little bit of everything, man. But was it just the regional nature of it? Was it the sound of it? Was it even just like the ministry philosophy of it in terms of like, being a little bit more overt about Christianity is, was it really a thing like that, or does it just seem like that to me?
it's interesting too because I've been so involved on the business side of things, and the label side
Right.
exposed me to the inner workings of how that system works.
Yes.
So I think there's obviously a geographical component where it's like one sound tends to be more popular in certain parts of the country, and
Yep.
and that totally makes sense. But I really think it boiled down to distribution, and because the way stores would buy in, it's like if you're a California-based artist and you have sales history, those stores are going to stock more of your next record, and it's easier to sell in and it's easier to sell through. It's also, working in touring. So I think because of how that sort of worked, I think it further solidified those factions, so to speak, where you saw certain labels and certain artists and certain types of sounds sort of get cemented within certain regions of the country. Because Christian retail is such a weird thing. It's like you could, if your record sold 100 copies in my store, and I put out another record, and we're not doing any videos, like doesn't even really matter what it looks like or what it sounds like, or maybe you weren't even touring, and you sold 100 copies, I'm bringing in 120 next time. And it was all built on kind of this weird autopilot approach, where that's why it was so hard to break artists back then, because it's like if you didn't have a huge success, you were sort of glass ceilinged at a certain threshold where it was really hard to break through that. But once you're in, and I think that's where that sort of benefited certain situations that maybe, this is going to sound terrible, but but that maybe didn't warrant those sorts of levels of exposure, only because it sold X amount of units before, then it doesn't matter.
Sure.
Which is, I guess it makes sense, because a lot of the Christian music industry up until the last few years especially was predicated on comfort. And, if they weren't comfortable with it, it was difficult to kind of, make any sort of breakthroughs with that. So with respect to Grapetree, I think that benefited them, because they would put out 30 albums a year,
right,
and they'd sell 3,000 or 4,000 copies of everything. So then they can throw away, Grapetree Records, we sold blah, 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 total number of units. It's like, well, you only had 2 or 3 really big albums out of that, and the rest were just kind of, sitting on the shelf, and they sold by virtue of being on the shelf.
Yo, by all
so
accounts,
a lot of that,
they seem like they were the Christian rap No Limit. That's what it feels like to me.
Yep. No, I mean that's a very fair comparison. I just wish they would have done business a little bit better. I think that scarred a lot of artists and stuff like that. But I think it's a really, really important part of the history of the genre, and really turned on a lot of kids that are going to listen to a Lil Rascal album that just Tunnel Rats or Cross Movement wouldn't have resonated with.
Yep.
So it's cool. It's a cool part of the history in that regard, and that God was using all of these imperfect vessels, all over the country and all over the world, for that matter, to reach the right type of person.
No, that's a good perspective, and it's interesting that you said that, man. So, what made you start Illect Records, man? Because for a lot of people, I guess, kind of going through what you go through, with Uprock and Beck Recordings, some people, man, it's like they get jaded by the whole label thing, And obviously, you know, you started this on your own terms, or whatever. But some people would have just been like, "Man, this isn't for me." And clearly, that's not your space because I mean, look, you've been running this thing. Illect's got to be close to 10 years, right?
2003.
I see. So you started it right after you left.
Yeah, and it wasn't intention to be like hey, this is the Up Rock Part 2 or anything. It was like we were trying to put out basically records by friends of ours.
Yeah.
So Illect was started in the spring of 2003. It was actually while I was on my way out at Up Rock. But there was three of us that started. It was John Madison, who was DJ All-Star,
Yep.
and Jay Choi, who actually ran a Christian, it was like a Christian music blog. It was called Illect. So it was Illect.com back then, and then myself. So we just wanted to put out music by our friends that, you know, we thought was good enough to be out there that maybe didn't otherwise have an opportunity. Jay had a kind of a business and pastoral background. John, you know, is a long-time head and DJ. I obviously had the experience I did. Excuse me. So I think it made sense because the three of us were really good friends. We still are. It made a lot of sense for us to kind of do that. So like guys like Flynn Adam from LA Symphony,
Yep.
Syntax the Terrific, Deep Space 5, and then Sev Static had an alias Student, and those were our first three records.
Crazy, bro. You guys have had quite a catalog even since then, man. Like, I mean, I remember, you know, you put some Jafia records out at one time.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, just a ton of people, bro. Like, do you still kind of have that mindset of, man, these are just people that we think we should put out, so we just put them out?
Yeah, I mean, it's that's always been a cornerstone of what we've tried to do with Illect. The last couple years, about 3 years ago, we really shifted kind of our business model and then also our ministry approach too, where we spent a long time kind of butting our heads with the Christian industry, and we felt like they weren't understanding us, and we were okay with that to a certain degree because, like, look, like nothing we do sounds like a Reach album,
Yep.
you know, and that's what everybody wants right now.
Of
but
course.
we knew that there was a space for what we do because there were, you know, kids growing up that maybe didn't identify with that sound or whatever, and we wanted to serve them. But what we realized is, like, those people are still going to find us, but where we're actually called to be is to be out in the mainstream market, because we know that our records are going to be huge in Europe, and they're going to be huge in Japan and Australia and all these other places, but, like, the Christian industry in America didn't really get us. So, like, why are we wasting our time there? So, about 4 years ago, we actually pulled all of our albums out of Christian bookstores. We didn't, you know, it was the hip-hop section on iTunes and not the Christian music section. Like, we just didn't even, you know, just kind of separated ourselves from that because we knew that for us to really impact the group of people we're sent to reach, they're not walking into a Christian bookstore. They're going to these secular hip-hop websites. So it was an intentional move there. Business-wise, it was actually really good because it was a lot less frustrating. We were recouping on more of our releases. And I think people just got what we were doing a lot better. So that made us kind of move into this new phase where we're being super intentional, obviously, about reaching our target market, and then also in terms of some internal business approaches, like we do a lot of sync licensing So major brands like, Google and Microsoft and Target. We did a really big Sprint commercial last year that everybody saw thousands of times. T-Wyla produced that track.
Yep.
So we're doing more of that sort of under the radar than almost anything else.
He's actually the one that hit me too. The fact that you were getting a lot of these placements for people. You know what I mean? Like me and him had a conversation. Bro, we talked I want to say me and him talked like almost the whole day. Right, the day right after DJ Official passed. Like you know what I mean? Like we hadn't talked in so long. And one of the things that he had mentioned when he was telling me about some of the stuff he was working on was how much of a blessing you had been to what he was doing and some of the placements and stuff you were getting from him and other people. And I was just like, man, that's amazing because, I remember seeing a couple years ago, like the RZA was really getting into like scoring movies and TV shows and all of that stuff. And I was just like, man, like that's dope to see Christians kind of getting into that space, and using the gift that way, man. So that's crazy.
No, it's been really cool because it gets us into spaces where we can reach more people. I mean,
right.
T-Wyla actually, we had an opportunity to score for a Star Wars trailer.
My God.
We didn't get picked.
Yeah.
But like that's the level of opportunities that we're working with for our guys, which as we land those, it allows us to do other things like that we really, really want to, like print vinyl, and maybe, do a international tour or something like that. So it's kind of all working together where we've got a really solid plan together. I mean, our sound is typically like a kind of a conscious hip-hop. We're not trying to be super underground. We're trying to kind of occupy that middle ground where it's like Tribe's new album, where it's still got that edge for the heads, but like somebody that's a more casual hip-hop fan could get into it. So that's the lane we're trying to occupy for like our albums. But like for the sync licensing stuff, I mean, we've got some trappy, hip hop stuff. We've got some EDM kind of leaning top 40.
T-Wyla is perfect for all of that because he can produce all of that.
Yeah, so it's fun because our roster right now, we've kind of turned it over a little bit, but we've got 13 producers and about a dozen MCs. And everybody's kind of at a different life stage, which is okay for us because we're super flexible. We don't have anybody to kind of answer to. We just do what we want to do. So like last week, we had an instrumental hip-hop joint that we wanted to put out, and we pulled it off in 2 days.
Man.
So we can do stuff like that. And then, if Target is like, hey, we've got to search out we want something that sounds like Chance the Rapper and Skrillex's 100 Waters. We can do that. Like our producers, like the team is, everybody kind of has their core sound, but everybody's willing to take some kind of creative risk. One of our producers out of Lansing, Michigan, SB, he's kind of on that soulful kind of, soulful hip hop. Like it sounds like something Erykah Badu would be on. But he did this.
Soulful
we almost landed this, but there was a Forza video game. It's like race cars and stuff. But he did this really amazing, like, kind of score for one of their commercials, and it's so different from what he normally does. And then one of the other things we were in the finalists for, there was a truth campaign, the anti-smoking organization. He did this really crazy, like trappy EDM sort of it sounded like a Taco Bell commercial almost. And we were actually, it was funny because there were two finalists, and it was a Tiwila track and an SB track. So they're like, oh, crud, who's going to get it? They ended up going in a different direction creatively. Like, they didn't even use any music, which is a bummer, because it was a really nice placement. But it's cool to see the guys kind of stretching their creativity, and the fact that we're obviously known as like an underground hip-hop label, but like that's not all that we are.
Wow. Yeah, that's kind of crazy. So 2 questions I want to ask you. One,
sure.
I feel like this period right now where you have a lot of labels, some are getting back involved, some are just getting involved for the first time. And there's been, I guess, these past couple of years, like a rush. I would actually say since Lecrae won his first Grammy, there's been a rush for a lot of bigger labels. I don't want to say majors, but bigger labels that kind of have their distribution through the majors to start signing Christian rappers. You know, some of the CCM labels, gospel labels, yada, yada, yada. Is this similar to that period of time when Uprock was founded and a lot of guys were getting their deals back then?
Yeah, there's a very exact correlation there. Back then, 2001, 2002, I was actually in Nashville one time for kind of a hip-hop summit where it was me and the heads of like 6 other labels and then some other, people involved. Or like, how do we get the Christian market more in tune with, urban music? Because there's a whole group of people. There's like, a kid in the hood isn't trying to listen to DC Talk or Audio Adrenaline or something like that. It's just not working for them. Like, they need, maybe a cross movement would be a fit for them, or T-Bone, or, they need people that look like them, too. So it's really interesting with the business parallels, with what happened then and what's happening now. I'm encouraged because I think the artists like know what they're doing a little bit more, and it wasn't just like, oh, hey, a record deal. This is really cool. Like, I should do this because that's the dream. And without understanding the implications of it, it's like, cool, you got signed, but that's not the end. Like, it's probably even more work now. So I'm excited because I 10 years ago, I never thought anything like this could ever happen within the landscape of Christian hip hop. I can remember when Grits, The Art of Translation, came out, and I think it sold like 8,000 copies the first week, and I was like, that blew my mind because that was so unattainable back then.
Sure.
And now it's like we might legitimately have 10 to 15 artists do something like that.
Yeah.
In a climate where it's hard to sell records.
Yep.
And I think the greater Christian industry has taken note that because they didn't pay attention to us for so long, we sort of just built our own infrastructure. So you had people like you and your radio show, and people like me with Sphere of Hip Hop and Rapzilla and Jam the Hype and Reach Records and Lamp Mode and all of these different pieces. We sort of just built our own infrastructure. Now they're like, it's obviously from a business sense, we can sell because I don't have any hard figures or facts, but I wouldn't be surprised if Christian hip hop was the only genre of Christian music right now that's growing year over year.
Yep.
Like, back during my Uprock years, it was like, you could count on one hand how many artists could tour nationally. And now there's dozens.
Yep.
So it's cool to see that progression, but it's interesting to see how many, of those labels are kind of coming back to it now. And I think a lot of them have really good motives too. And I know a few of the people involved, and I've done some work for a few of them as well. And I'm not concerned like I was back in my op rock days. I mean, some of the stuff I heard at that summit, I was just like, oh my gosh, like yeah, this we don't, it's like a 12-year-old kid rapping about 12-year-old kid things is not the future of Christian hip hop.
Right.
Like I'm sorry, 12-year-old kids can identify with that, but not grown men and women. So it's yeah, and be like, well, we need a Christian JV, and we need a Christian, so and so, and I was like, no, we don't. We, yeah.
So let me ask you this: how come Christian rap hasn't worked as well with the black church and the gospel music industry? And I'm not saying it hasn't worked. I mean, the truth does very well in that space.
Mm-hmm.
Kent Jones, you know what I mean? I think Bizzle's doing well in that space right now. But by and large, for the most part, like historically, you know what I mean? It's like the majority of this is always centered around the CCM industry as opposed to the gospel industry. And why do you think that is?
So there's two things. One would be I think the gatekeepers aren't exactly open to it, and until that kind of turns over and you get new younger people. And I think that's also part of the renaissance within the greater Christian music industry embracing hip hop, is there's people our age that are in the positions of power to make decisions and influence, and that's what we grew up with. So it's not like this newfangled rap music thing coming along, and it's kind of a new thing to them, even though it had been around already for 30 years. So it's not as abstract for them to kind of think through. So I think the gatekeepers are a little bit of a hurdle there.
You think it's industry gatekeepers? You think it's pastors?
Industry gatekeepers for sure within the gospel market. And I see it with my PR work all the time. It's like, and this transitions into the second point, and I think the bigger way to kind of change and influence that is how you present yourself. And I think a lot of artists and a lot of labels dealing with hip-hop music haven't done a good enough job in how they communicate with these people. Because the thing I learned in the first month I was working at Uprock was that, like, I have to, like, dumb down my presentation enough for them to get what this is about, because when they see a graffiti cover, like the Tunnel Rat album or the New Breed album or whatever, it's like, hey, we think kids would like this, but, like, this is scary to me. So basically you have to kind of hold their hand and make them feel comfortable that, this isn't, demonic or, anything like that. So it's like, how do you get them from point A to point B? So we made some very deliberate points to kind of get them to that point to where they could feel comfortable engaging music within that context. So we would do things like send them their testimony, send them examples of what they're doing in the community. Yeah. We would do little audio devotional messages where we could break down one of the songs and be like, this is what this song is about. This is the spiritual significance of this song. And this is what God was teaching me during this time and why I wrote this verse.
Wow.
And doing things very intentionally like that to just be like, look, the packaging and the sound, like, you're not going to get it. But the kids today will, because this is their language.
Yep.
But we had to do those extra things and go that extra mile to communicate that, like, look, like, this is what kids are going to respond to, and this is what resonates with young people. And so I really feel like a lot of those issues could be alleviated by how we present ourselves, because you can't just, roll up and kind of, be in your your rap clothes. You might have to wear a suit and a tie.
Yep.
It's just the way it is. Like, it's a very imperfect industry, and there's other concerns I have about it as well. But like, you have to be willing to do those things to make a lasting impact. So I think that will influence a lot of those gatekeepers to change, but more turnover is definitely helping. I mean, I've seen tremendous strides in the last 3 or 4 years with my PR work in that space. Now I can communicate with a lot of these people because I've taken that extra time to help them understand that, like, look, this rapper loves Jesus. Like, here's his story. Like, do you think your audience would identify with this? Like,
yeah.
And then it's more often than not, it's yes.
You know what's funny, Josh? Sometimes, like, I've been doing a lot of thinking back to when I first started, and there was a lot of artists even in our scene, and I grew up like hip hop since I got out my mama's womb, pretty much. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you know what I mean? Like, Run DMC, LL, like all that stuff you was naming, like, I was right there with you. But there was a whole lot of artists that when I first came in contact with them, I wasn't sure if they loved the Lord, because my church experience had been the black church.
Mm-hmm.
And so if it wasn't in my face, even though I could kind of read between the lines, I was just like, man, that doesn't feel authentic to me. You know what I mean? Not understanding that for some people, it was just the opposite. Like, it doesn't have to be in your face for it to be authentic. It's just a part of who I am. So just even hearing you articulate and explain that, like, really hit home for me, because it even took me a while to get it. And like, bro, I love this music. You know what I'm saying? So
Mm-hmm.
I get it, bro.
Yeah. It's definitely a clash, because everything about hip hop and hip hop culture doesn't seem to really jive with Christianity.
Yep.
But I think in the last 5 years, people are starting to figure it out. And it's really encouraging for me, because I know it was really difficult 20 years ago with the industry challenges, and then you had everybody kind of at each other's throats about methodology and approach, and now I think people are...
See, we didn't even talk about that.
Yeah, maybe. Yeah, I know, that's like a whole other hour. But now I think people are willing to put aside, like, their differences, and it's like, I wouldn't do it that way, but, like, I understand and respect why you are. Like, and I think as people have actually gotten to know each other and kind of know their story and be willing to ask and answer questions about that, I think a lot of that defensiveness and kind of attacks have sort of simmered down. And it's been, anytime I go to an event, I'm watching people, like, the oil and water sort of thing. Yeah. Like, I'm watching people to see how they interact, and I've seen a dramatic upswing in the amount of love people are showing to each other. And because so much of hip-hop is built on respect, I think that's been a really awesome starting point for people that, maybe have differing viewpoints on that methodology and approach. And, I mean, real talk, like, there was one year I walked into Flavor Fest, and, like, a lot of these people wouldn't even talk to me.
Wow.
And it was just like, I love Jesus every bit as much as you do, but, like, you don't like how I present my website. Like, but once they got to know me, then it was a different story. So I think it's cool that is changing, and I privately encourage, men and women in our industry to ask questions and get to know people, and not be afraid to kind of be a little vulnerable in that in that regard. So it's pretty, and that's maybe even more encouraging than the business success side of thing. I think we're all growing up a little bit.
Yep. No, I'm with you, bro. So speaking of growing, what do you think about Chance the Rapper, bro? That's been a really hot topic recently.
Man, I wish everybody would kind of get off its case. Like, I think there's been a couple things floating through my mind lately. It really feels a lot like the time when Mace experienced his conversion, where I think a lot of people in Christian hip hop, the fans, are projecting certain things onto him that's not him. So I really, my hope is that people would be praying for him and doing what they can to encourage people like him to kind of continue on in the journey of faith. And in real talk, like, none of us know him. So we really don't know where he stands outside of some sound bites and articles and conjecture and assumption and stuff like that. So I think it's really dangerous for us to kind of make too much of a judgment there. But I'm personally encouraged. Like, I think it's cool. One other kind of component too is I think it really reminds me of the golden calf sort of thing, where it's like we're looking for a savior, like someone to kind of save Christian hip hop or take it to this new thing. And I mean, Lecrae, this poor man, like, everything that he's had to go through the last couple of years it's just like, and when he put out that joint, it was a couple months ago, with the Blessing song, you know, it's like, dang, like, all the burden he has to feel like he's, you know, it's not his calling to save the genre of Christian hip hop or pull it up necessarily. I mean, that's going to happen indirectly, probably, because he has had a lot of success. But I think it's unfair for any of us to really expect, you know, those guys to conform to our idea of what they should be doing. And I mean, really, the only thing you can do is just pray and encourage and you know, hope that, you know, God just leads them where he wants them to go and that they're faithful to that.
Yeah, he told me a while ago that, like, when everything happened with Ambassador and Truth, people started to look to him as, like, the quote-unquote leader, and he didn't want it. And I think there's been this tension ever since that time, like around the time Rebel dropped. Like, Rebel dropped, and it did really well. Then what was next? Rehab dropped, and it was ridiculous, off the charts. And that was when people really started looking to him, because the two of them, you know, they were focused on their families at that point, you know, trying to repair that stuff. And, you know, then he did Church Clothes. And I think that's when he kind of started that shift. And I think there's been this tension because he's been the most popular artist, like, since that period of time. I mean, you could probably, you know, some would say NF might be in that space now, or Andy or somebody, but you know what I mean? Like, I think that's what it was, man. And I mean, it's unfortunate what he went through, bro. Like, it is. When you get to a point where you're questioning whether or not you're a Christian, like, nobody should want that, man. You know what I mean? Like,
no, it's not fair.
Yeah.
And I don't think it's reasonable. And I don't know if it's just because Christian hip hop has always had this chip on its shoulder, because it's always felt like me against the world sort of thing. And some of that is healthy, you know, for being motivated and kind of fulfilling, you know, your purpose and being motivated. But on the other hand, I don't know that it's a positive thing for, you know, people to project that on other people. And That's probably been one of my main kind of concerns with the whole of the genre.
I think it's getting away from that now, though. Like I don't think I think he's just become polarizing for a lot of different things. Like, he's talking about race and stuff. Like I think it's like you can't separate all of that. But I don't know if people are looking for the savior or the leader the same way they were before. But I mean, keep this in mind too. Like, you probably appreciate this. Like, New York, like, mainstream hip hop had it for a long time. Like, King of New York, like, that was like a thing. Like, it was Biggie. Method Man had a claim for like 6 months. You know what I mean? Then it was Jay-Z for a long time. Then 50 Cent came out. And then when he started dissing everybody, that just like killed it. Like, he started beefing with everybody. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I don't know.
Yeah, it's funny. It's it's the earthly king. Like, we can't handle ourselves if there's not like something we can point to. And I'm just thankful, super grateful that there's so much diversity and variety in our scene. And I mean, any kid that's out there and is searching, for some music that has a little bit of hope in it. I mean, there's everything. Probably the only thing I could say is lacking is women. Like, there's not enough representation for women involved in our scene, and I hope that continues to change. There's been a little bit lately,
Why
but
do you
not
think
enough.
That is?
Sexism. I mean,
you think it's that? You think that's the main thing?
And I don't know if it's like overt, like this is, hip hop is a man's game, or whatever. I mean, you can obviously point to the way women are portrayed in mainstream hip hop, and then also how women themselves in mainstream hip hop kind of brand themselves as being a stumbling block. But I really think just people aren't willing. And it's been a thing with Christian music. Nobody's willing to take a risk. I mean, there's no reason why someone like Butta P or Angie Rose shouldn't be on some sort of larger platform.
Yeah,
they're good enough. They're good enough. So I'm hoping that continues to grow and change. And there's just more, because I mean, it's like, if you're a 15-year-old girl or something like that, it's like, okay, here's 20 Christian rappers, and none of them look like you. It was kind of like 20 years ago. It's like, the kid in the inner city, that's a minority. It's like, none of these people look like you. They're all white guys. So I think from that alone, like, I think the genre needs to be a little bit more forward-thinking and encouraging in that way.
Yeah, no, you're right, man. I think one of the things that's happening, I think, at least from a urban perspective, this Poets in Autumn tour with Jackie and Genetics, I think, is doing well, but that's not like teenagers.
Right.
Most of those people going to those shows is like our age. You know what I mean? And I guess maybe there's some people in their 20s, but it's definitely not like teenagers. Like, I felt like the one girl that I thought was going to get signed, and I think she works with them now, but I really thought she was Susie Rockton, but Natalie Lauren. I thought I felt it would have been perfect for Reach to sign her. Like, when I felt like that would have been just like super perfect, but
it's interesting too, because what scares a lot of the decision makers from making these business decisions is the thing that could be like the good part, because the space is wide open. There's nothing there. So you could pretty well dominate that space if you're willing to take a risk and put some resources behind it. And it's not saying like, sign someone and spend $500,000, marketing them. Like, you don't even need to do that. Just put out really dope content and grow it from the ground up. And I think there's a lot of people that would get into that, but there's nothing there. I mean, it's like you could ask 98% of Christian hip hop fans to name 5 female Christian rappers, and they couldn't.
Bro. They couldn't do it, bro.
So hopefully it continues to grow, and there's just more of that, and then more at kind of every degree, where it's like, like what Jackie does. Like, obviously adults are probably going to resonate to that, and then something for the, the suburban, teen girls, and, just more diversity and just more opportunity there, I think would be really amazing.
Man, Josh, let me tell you something, bro. We could do like another hour and a half if time permitted, my brother. But you got like 8 businesses you're running over there, man. You got PR, you got the label, you got the website, and all of that stuff, man. What do you have next coming down the pike, man?
Oh man, my day job is PR, so I stay really busy with that. A lot of indie artists. I spend a lot of time mentoring guys too.
Yep.
I probably turn down as much business as I take on, because I want to see these people grow and kind of meet their potential. So PR work keeps me really busy. Sphere of Hip Hop, 20 years, March 1st. We're real close. We're hoping March 3rd we will launch a 24-hour commercial-free radio station.
Nice.
Been working on that for a good 3.5 years.
I feel like I saw a press release or an email about that.
No, yeah, I sent you and Michaela something a couple weeks ago, and that's what kind of led to this call. So I think that'll be cool. We're kind of taking our own sort of approach, where artists that we typically cover on the website, and then I'm also mixing in some instrumental hip hop content. So you might hear some Pete Rock instrumentals or Jay Dilla, stuff like that, because we feel like there's a diverse enough core audience that they mess with that and they like that, and then also kind of reaching outside of our core audience and trying to draw some more people in. I think is going to be a good thing for us. But yeah, so 24-hour commercial free, just because those royalties are like 5 times more if you run commercials. So just going to go commercial free, just music wall to wall should be pretty dope. Illect just finished Sivion's new album. Really cool. Serene Poems has a new album. Jay Raban's EP is actually out Friday. That should be really cool. It's got a soulful kind of jazzy style to it. Jose Moore, Armand, and another producer that's everybody's favorite in Christian hip hop. I can't say yet. They're working on an EP. It's got some mixtapes.
I'm gonna guess. I have no inside information. I'm gonna guess it's either Wit or West P. I'm leaning towards Wit though.
Those are pretty good guesses.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So, yeah, just lots of stuff. I mean, we've kind of adjusted our model where people aren't willing to kind of wait for or listen through full albums. So we're trying to drop something new every week, whether it be a single or an album, an EP, whatever. We've got some different things. We pulled a pool of like 85 beats from all of our producers, and then had all of our rappers pick 3 to 5 of the beats, and everybody's just going to bust a 16 on it, and we're going to just start pushing those out, which would be cool to get people, you know, people that maybe like Jay Rodin's beats, but, you know, don't know who Raging Moses is or James Garden is or Armand is, but they know Jay's beats, so they're gonna listen to it, and then also kind of foster some interlabel, you know, collaboration and stuff like that. It's been really good so far. So we've got, I think, 27 of those done, and we're just gonna start kind of leaking those out, and yeah, so we've got like 5 or 6 projects ready to go, and then about a dozen singles, and we're creating more. So it should be a busy year.
Man, that's great, man. Josh, bro, I just want to tell you, man, you know, congratulations again on 20 years. Like that, like to me, man, just that level of consistency just says so much about you as a person. And man, I mean, listen, man, I'm praying you rocking another 20, man. This is the halfway point.
We'll see. I'll roll up into Flavor Fest with my walker with the tennis balls on the front.
Hilarious, man. Hilarious, bro. Well, man, I appreciate you, brother. And, you know, we'll definitely stay in touch, man. And, you know, we'll be on the lookout for all of this good stuff you got going, man.
All right. Thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it, Wade.
Man, no problem, bro.
On the Wade Radio Show. On the Wade Radio. On the Wade Radio Show. Where it's much more than music, it's ministry.